Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Umineko Tea Party podcast for Kenjima.org. This time is episode 6, Dawn of the Golden Witch. I'm back.
Dawn High!
I still got my board. The official vote was 10 Ryukashis for me, 1 Lambda for Aspie to get his board back, and apparently 12 burns for us being massive nerds.
Yeah!
So I would like to congratulate Magus on winning the fight that he never should have picked.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to point that out. Oh, perfect.
So yeah, we are here to talk about episode 6.
Yeah.
An exciting little game where we have a battler take control for the first time. I guess we'll throw it into the 30-second recap.
Welcome to Game 6 of Umineko. Taking a break from the high-stakes murder games of witches.
Battle amidst the slice of life chapter you've always wanted.
Exploring romance.
Demons of romance. And absolutely no murder.
In an ingenious move.
Battle to make sure no one dies so that he can be saved from his nap to run overtime.
On the commentary today,
Featherine,
Aurora, and Beatrice.
Over to them now. Hello, children of man. Today's slice of life. What's that? Oh no! She's killed them all! Comedy cannot save Oshumia Battler!
Shout out to Featherine.
So unfortunately, today we won't be joined by Feather and Augustus Aurora, but we will be joined by Aspirety, your former game master, lord of Rekenjima.org.
Hey guys.
We also have FlareNetworkC.
Oh, hey, yeah, I'm here too.
We have MagusVerborum joining us from the dark depths of my YouTube channel.
I have arrived.
Seraphitic, bringing it back in as the only survivor once again.
Yes, it is good to be alive and vindicated once more.
So I am your game master, Jokrono, for this episode. So, let's go into some first impressions for the podcast. I suppose, Seraphitic, you and I are the only fresh meat here, so why don't you take us off with your first impressions?
Okay, this episode is either my favorite episode or my second least favorite episode. Okay, so here's the thing.
How?
In my mind, the last, I guess, half-ish of episode 6 is freaking amazing. I love it. I love it to death. It's got all the hype. It vindicates so much of what you and I, Jokrono, have been theorizing for a while. And it's got just such great characters. I love the interactions between Beatrice, like Chick Beatrice and Elder Beatrice, Chick Beatrice and Battler. I love the Erika Beatrice fight at the end. I mean, who doesn't? Plus, we get to see Best Girl in glasses, so what's not to love about that?
Hey, yeah, that sprite was just there for no reason.
Freaking loved it. But the part that I don't like, and I mean, we can get to this when we talk about this character, I don't like Featherine.
Oh!
You monster!
It's official, I'm declaring war on you for this game board.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to throw down with you on this.
That's going to rustle some Featherines, I know, but
You did not.
Oh,
We
no.
were baited! It was bait!
But okay, I will discuss this more when we talk about this character, I guess. But basically, I didn't like how Ryukashi was treating his readers with Featherine. More specifically with Hachijo, but I guess since Hachijo is sort of Featherine's vessel, it kind of feels like the whole thing is a little bit condescending to readers. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. Also, the beginning is just kind of slow, which I guess after episode 5 feels kind of, I don't know, a little bit. Maybe it's contrasting because we have sort of the bookends of the end of episode 5 and the end of episode 6, kind of making the middle, with the beginning of episode 6 feel a little bit slow. But yeah, other than that, that one little gripe that I have, episode 6 is incredible, and it has my favorite new music piece. Life is the best thing that I have heard from Umineko. I just love that. It was so amazing. Anyway, those are my sort of overall impressions.
I won't fight you about Featherine just yet, but I will say, I think in terms of the pacing of this episode, I felt like it was kind of a return to form. Like, Erika was a surprising introduction, which kind of ramped up the energy at the beginning of episode 5, but it still actually had a pretty slow-paced introduction with all of the exploring Natsuhi's past. And I feel like every episode's kind of been that to an extent. It's very much... They all start off slow, they all build massively, hit a huge peak at the end, and then it just brings you right back down to earth for the beginning of the next one. And in between all of those points, you also have a ridiculous roller coaster of emotions and energy, so I don't know. I disagree that the beginning of episode 6 is like too slow or anything of the sort, but I do understand that, you know, sometimes it's just like, God, can we just get to the good bit already? Can we just get there? But
Yeah.
there still is a lot of stuff to pay attention to in the beginning, and I still found that really interesting.
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
found this episode does really good for characterization of the people on the game board. It's kind of something that lost a bit of focus in episode 5, Sans and Natsuhi. But here we really like get deep into the heads of like Kyrie, Ava, George, Jessica, pretty much everyone. Like even the men who weren't really included that much got their own time because they were like the survivors, like lamenting over their lost lives, and they had some bonding over that. And that was seeing Rudolph cry, man. Like that was that hit me hard. But yeah, there's just lots of great characterization for the people on Rekenjima this time around. I thought it was really cool.
I think that's definitely one of the strong points of this episode.
Actually, I feel like the scope and focus of the story in this episode is a lot tighter than in a lot of the other episodes. You know, it's very much focused just on kind of the theme of love, and it's Battler's logic error, and then Chick Beatrice, you know, figuring out her whole situation, and then the sort of love game that kind of plays along into that. But even though it is a very tight scope and it is very focused and the plot kind of flows more naturally than I feel like a lot of the other episodes do, it is also simultaneously very messy, because when you think about it, this is the episode with almost the most different levels of meta so far, because you've got the game board, and then you've got Battler and Chick Beatrice observing the game board, and then you have Featherine and Anjay observing Battler and Chick Beatrice observing the game board, which can be a little bit messy to follow.
Yeah, and then we get, of course, us observing all of that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Before you carry on, big shout out to Vice Golbez for trying to narrow that down. I think he did a really good piece on that on the forum discussion, which will be linked in the description, of course.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in trying to unravel how those layers work from our perspective, I'd really suggest checking that out, because I totally agree with what he wrote there.
Yeah. Shout out to Vice. But
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
this game board and, you know, the episode as a whole, like it even says that there are the two tales of, you know, the game board itself with Erika versus Battler, and then there's Chick Beatrice trying to like figure out what her purpose is and all that sort of stuff. It says that like these two tales, you know, converged, became one. Like the entire focus of this episode is all about Battler like showing his love and showing that he understands the story. Like Battler has a very clear objective and he doesn't shy away from it like he does in a lot of the previous episodes. Like I kind of talked a lot in the playthrough that I do with Jokrono here.
Oh my.
Shout out to that. About how Battler, especially in episode 2, but in most of the, you know, the question episodes, Battler is a detective, but he doesn't really act like one a lot of the time. He doesn't want to suspect people, he doesn't go back to crime scenes, he doesn't check bodies, like, he just doesn't do the role very well. Maybe a little bit better in the actual meta space when he's fighting Beatrice, but that's, you know, it's a little bit different, I guess. But in this one, Battler knows the truth, he is the golden game master, he has everything under control seemingly, and he has one focus, and that is to show that he understands everything.
Seems kind of debatable whether he has everything under control, though.
Are we gonna jump on that right now?
Before we do, I do want to mention though, in contrast to the claim that this episode has the tightest focus, I don't necessarily disagree, but I do want to throw the counterpoint in that I think all of the episodes have actually had a very similar focus. It's just that this is the first one that kind of like tells you what the focus is.
I would agree.
I feel like this episode is in many ways very heavy-handed, which can be a good or bad thing. It definitely feels a lot like episode 3 in terms of difficulty, where it's like, we're gonna like really like hand feed you all of this information. Like, if you don't understand what magic is, well, get ready because we're going to explain it again.
Well, yeah, I mean, to throw it back to what I was saying in the episode 5 podcast, I feel like that's because the mystery and the questions are less important as we go on. It's more about resolving what's happened.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you and I were saying that, Jokrono, that it feels like the focus is off of the game board so much and more on what's happening around the game board, and sort of developing the meta pieces, well, not pieces, but the meta characters more than the, like trying to seek out the truth so much.
I disagree with that.
Well...
Tell us why,
okay, that's
Aspie.
fine.
Well, like I said, this episode was all focused around the Rekengima characters and their plight. It was a lot less about, like, Burnkastel, Lambda. Like, there was a little bit of that there, but for the most part, Burnkastel, Lambda, Delano and Erika kind of took a little bit of a backseat in this episode. Their main role was when it came to the logic era. But everything up to that point was entirely based on Rekengima.
Well, I mean, was it though? I mean, it felt like most of it was based on Meta Battler and like Chick Beatrice and Elder Beatrice to an extent as well, who aren't exactly game pieces.
Yeah, and even game board stuff kind of felt like representations of stuff that was going on elsewhere and more just tools to the main focus rather than its own focus.
I mean, I feel like that can take it back to what Flair was saying before about how the episode is paced, because there are kind of very clear sections. You know, we have Battler dealing with Chick Beatrice, we have the beginning of the game board, we have the love trials, and though they overlap, there's kind of a very clear distinction of this is activity A, this is activity B, this is activity C. Go have fun, children.
Well, like, one of the things that is very kind of deliberately laid out by EP5, in my mind, EP5 and 6 are very much a companion pieces to each other. Because in EP5, we kind of deconstruct the idea of the murder mystery, and then EP6, we reconstruct it.
Absolutely.
But one thing that was made very apparent by EP5, I think so at least, is that Lambda Delta, as the game master, is in control of all of the pieces that are not the detective, essentially, on the game board, on the lowest layer. So when we read the stories of these characters, even though it is about Kyrie and is about Ava and George and is about Rosa, we know, the reader knows for certain at this point, that Game Master Battler is writing this. Like, he is telling us something about the truth, about what he understands of the game through the way that he is writing these characters.
I feel like when you say that the Chiro is focused more on the meta, it feels like you're trying to like pull it away from the main narrative, like it's something else. The meta is completely unrelated to Rekengima. But with stuff like this, where Battler is trying to tell a story of what he believes, you know, is the truth of everything that happened on Rekengima and all that, you're getting more back to reality, I guess you could say. It's kind of weird to think about, but
it all intertwines, right? The two tales became one, and they weave one truth. Like, I think that if you try to separate the meta, and this is my personal opinion, but if you try and separate the meta from the game board, and you try and separate the reality that we're being shown from the meta, you know, I think that if you try and separate them completely, even though they are explicitly, like, split up in this episode, we move from one location to the next. Like, we even have a bit where Chick Beardo, who's supposedly in the meta game board space, goes into the space where Featherine and Angie are. Like,
weird.
Like, there's clearly a blurred line between each of these spaces, and I think that that's important to keep in mind.
But at the same time, you're not really going to get anywhere if you just examine one of them. You have to look at all of them. They're pieces of a puzzle still, because that's just the nature of Umineko, to have all these stories be part of one whole.
I do think that there is a certain scope where, you know, now that Battler has the golden truth, now that Battler is the game master, knows the truth, as we were told at the end of episode 5, you really have to question, you know, if his moments of incompetence and his inability to do certain things in this episode were intentional, or whether they were part of an elaborate ruse. This is actually a point that Magus raised to me when we were kind of discussing it just after we'd finished, but it actually makes a whole lot of sense if Battler set this up all to try and get Chick Beato to have the reaction that she did.
I don't think we'll get to that part just yet, but like, even if you go back to when he shows the scene between Shannon and George goes on a long, literally monologue about his past and how he felt, about girls and how he approached like a romantic relationship, and then Erika is like, when are we gonna get to the murders? Like, he just doesn't want to look at that stuff. Like, and we know, of course, anybody who's paying attention to the narrative knows that love is a huge part of the story. It is everywhere. It's literally everywhere. And Battler is like pulling that up for this episode, but it's very clearly like, you need to understand that Battler is putting these scenes in because he understands everything. I don't think that he does anything in this episode accidentally. I think that it's all part of his, because he's the game master. He controls literally everything except the detective, who is also the culprit. So wait, like, is there a detective? I don't know that there is. So theoretically, he controls all the pieces, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, I think the other thing about him knowing what's going on was that there was a very interesting parallel between Battler in this episode and Kinzo in the beginning of episode 3, where in the beginning of episode 3 is actually the first mention we get of the name, like, Chick Beatrice. It's, I can't remember whether it's Rosa or Kinzo, but basically says that Beatrice looked like a chick trapped in a cage or whatever.
It was Rosa.
And I think that it's really interesting to consider whether, you know, that is symbolic of Battler descending into madness himself to try and get his love back, or whether he's saying, like, I understand what happened to Kinzo back in his past. And also, when we bring up the fact that supposedly Hachijo wrote episode 3 as well, if we're then going further out from the authorship perspective, that'd be a very clear parallel in an author's mind if they were writing those two things that were nearly blow by blow the same.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you saying that, like, the scenes that we get with Kinzo, like, you know, Chick Beatrice tries to call him father, and he's like, no, don't call me father, like, you're a piece. There's, like, a lot of stuff going on there. I don't know. I don't know how much you want to read into that, but there's definitely, like, implications that Battler is kind of replaying some scenes that Kinzo might have had with a Beatrice that he knew before.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Jokrono. What do we think about that whole father thing? That was an interesting little piece of information that seemed to kind of get dismissed partway through.
I think that you and I, Seraphitic, both had the same idea after episode 5 about the child from 19 years ago being, like, the third in line Beatrice.
Yeah, I think we are in agreement on that theory that I think I had at the end of episode 4, right before episode 5 started.
But I do find, particularly in relation to that claim, the idea that instead of getting Bronove and Vigilia in the meta scenes where we see that whole interaction, we actually get Genji and Kumasawa. I think that's a very steady hint that what we're actually seeing is something that probably did happen in Kinzo's past.
I did think that was interesting, the fact that they had Genji and Kumasawa. It was odd.
Also, like, the scenes for those meta scenes, like the backgrounds were like, it usually took place in, like, you had Kinzo's study, and then you had what appeared to be Kuadorian.
Yeah, that's true. There was definitely some scenes that looked, or some backgrounds that looked like Kuadorian. It has been sort of a thing that's been going on. I can't remember exact references as to when, but there have been a lot of parallels, now that I think about it, throughout the first half of Umineko, comparing Battler and Kinzo.
Oh god, yes.
Yup.
And saying how alike they were. It wasn't something that I particularly took notice of at first, but episode 6 really sort of hammered that home with how alike they really were. Even now in dress and how they act and how they treat certain people, and the very fact that Battler seems to have changed so much between sort of the end of episode 5 and now.
Yeah. it just kind of brought to mind something interesting to me. Like, we know that, like, in episode 5, there's all this talk about how Kinzo's like, hey, wow, Battler, you're actually a pretty good, like, successor to me. There's, like, they have those cool bro moments in episode 5. It really makes me think that if Battler didn't leave the family 6 years ago, if Kinzo didn't die, like, a year ago or whatever, then maybe he would actually, like, see Battler and, like, think, you know, that might be a successor right there. Like, I can actually see, like, things coming out very differently if only Battler didn't leave like that. It's very interesting.
Shout out to Rudolph in episode 4.
With the strength of a billion idiots, it's perfect.
Speaking of episode 4, Beatrice's final question in episode 4, who am I? I feel like that's a good question to come back to now, especially with all the different Beatrice variations in this episode specifically, with Chick Beatrice and Elder Beatrice. What are your thoughts now on that question?
Like, they spend a lot of time with this Chick and Elder Beatrice thing, and it's a little bit weird if you're just reading it surface value, but it's clear that they're, like, trying to convey something. Yeah, it's kind of like it's like this whole investigation process of trying to figure out what comprises the being known as Beatrice. I'm interested to hear what you, Jokrono and Seraphitic, kind of take away from these scenes.
Sure.
He's been waiting for this.
So, I think the obvious thing to me in these scenes is that what we're seeing through Chick and Elder Beatrice is meant to be like a retelling of how the Beatrice responsible for the game boards came into being, even though it's played out as like the recreation as Beatrice rediscovers herself. I think what it's actually meant to basically show us is the culprit, who Seraphitic and I both agree and kind of just has to be at the end of this game board. Shannon and Cannon as one person with all of these personalities in their head, you know, Zephyr, Furfur, Shannon, Cannon, Beatrice,
Maybe this whole episode was just a cooking show, and this is how you bake a Beatrice.
I mean, pretty much, right?
And a dash of that.
And it's like, you know, Elder Beatrice basically signifies all of the parts of stories that became the personality of Beatrice that the culprit wore, for lack of a better term.
Like the legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it did feel a lot like Elder Beatrice represented sort of the legends and the myths and all of the stories that had been told amongst the servants about
Very interesting
Beatrice.
how Erika exposed that some of that is just bullshit.
I mean, did Erika really expose much? It kind of felt like...
Well, it's more like she exposed some glaring, like, contradictions in the law.
It seems a lot like Erika is once again being a commentary on readers in that case, where it's like, oh look, it's not magic, it's bullshit, whereas this point you kind of should have the understanding that that's kind of fucking besides the point.
Yeah. We should know by now. Do we want to comment on that scene it was at the beginning of episode 6 with Maria and Erika's quote-unquote battle to the death?
The most over-the-top battle over the smallest thing.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that throwdown. I was so happy.
It's such a stupid scene, though. Oh my god. Like, even is it Cornelia or Gertrude who says, know that this fight has no point? Like, the entire scene is just to highlight how Erika's like, there is truth to be found here. It is entirely inconsequential to my purpose here, but I must prove this little 9-year-old girl wrong. Right? Like, she's so full of herself.
Well, I think what it's trying to show you there is, like, this entire episode's theme is love, and Erika's entire shtick, if you will, is that she's a detective without love for the case that she's looking at here, and it kind of just shows that you're basically not going to get anywhere if you're not looking at it with love.
Yeah. Although, Maria does have a spot of hope, I would say, when she's told in Golden Truth that it wasn't Maria, rather. It was,
Chick Beatrice.
Chick Beto is told that the candy trick is a splendid bit of magic with the Golden Truth.
That blew my mind. Part of me was expecting the Golden Truth to be a wild bamboozle, but I wasn't expecting it to be quite that way. Just to have it like, this is magic set in gold was like, what? What am I meant to do with this?
What does it mean? I'd love to know what you guys think of the Golden Truth at this point, because we've only had like 2 lines in the Golden Truth so far. So like, do you guys have any idea of what it is?
They're like so different in context too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Kinzo is dead as opposed to, this is magic.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, Kinzo is Dead is also Red Truth from other games, whereas This Is Magic is not a Red Truth at all. In fact, it had just been denied that this was magic, right?
With the red, yeah.
Yeah, the Red had just denied it as magic, and then in Gold they were able to say that it was.
Wasn't it Lambda who said that sometimes the Gold Truth is superior or inferior to the Red? This might be a case where it's inferior.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it might be that it's commenting on what magic is rather than what like relating to the strength of something. I mean, we've been saying for a long time, right, that magic in some sense is like a form of escapism, right? People who have very little hope or joy in life turn to magic in order to satisfy some urge for something, some kind of miracle could occur, you know, some kind of magic can be grasped. In that way, we could say that the candy trick is a piece of magic for Maria. It's something that gives her hope. In that way, yeah, it is a piece of magic.
I mean, I really think you need to kind of step back and think about your definition of magic, what it means in the context of Umineko. That's one of my favorite things. Is from the very beginning, we presented with this big scary witch and how magic is terrifying, but by this point, like, we have all these crazy, colorful characters that are just such a pleasure to read about. You know, like the stakes in episode 2 are very brutal and unrelenting, but by this point, they're kind of silly. You know. Seeing how magic has kind of changed. Although I don't think that magic itself has changed, because this is what Ryuji does. He reframes things. He reframes, you know, the way, like, I don't think that the stakes have changed, but the way that we see them has changed, just as an example.
Same with Beatrice, eh?
Definitely.
Anyway.
All the characters have kind of changed a bit.
I feel like we got a bit sidetracked from Jokrono.
I don't even remember where we were.
You were talking about your big theory for who Beatrice is.
I
You wanna get on
mean, yeah. I suppose we should talk about that. And I also want to, here in the episode 6 podcast, talk about episode 5 a bit. Because that was something that we glazed over in the episode 5 podcast, because I didn't think it was a problem, so I didn't push it back then. And I'm glad that I didn't, because it is so much more interesting to talk about it now. And that is, if we are accepting, which again we kind of have to, Shannon and Cannon being one person as the culprit, what the hell was with Erika being in the same room as them in episode 5? Back then I said it was just a case of motive, that Erika didn't care that that information was wrong because she was trying to corner Natsuki because that's the way that Byrne was playing. But then this episode we get a whole different look at that in terms of Erika's motivation, and it seems that what she really doesn't trust is love, and she just wants to pick apart the truth because she can't trust anyone. So the question then is, I want to throw it down, why did Erika maybe ignore that piece of information?
It is a bit of a tricky thing, exactly, because we, in one sense, we have to be seeing the scene through someone who isn't Erika, right? I mean, if we're seeing the room through Battler's eyes.
I mean, the narration in that scene is through Battler's eyes, so the fact that it happens isn't a problem. The fact that we see them together isn't a problem. The question is if Shannon and Cannon are two personalities that people on the island are claiming to exist, why did Erika ignore that one of them wasn't there?
Why does Erika not say anything? I want to propose something, because I think that Erika is an intelligent character. However, I think that in the same way that we see scenes through other characters' eyes, I think that, and this kind of ties back into the idea of Vigilius, which is supposed to be a character in the original episode 3 that was changed because of reasons. That character was supposed to be a detective that would work alongside Battler, but see things from a different perspective, kind of in the way that Erika does. And I think that it's just a case of the Game Master telling Erika a different story. Or perhaps maybe Byrne a little bit to do with this. That's what I'm thinking.
I will tell you what I think it is.
What do you think?
I went back through episode 5, and I don't think at any point in the story anyone in a conversation from like Erika's perspective actually mentions the existence of canon. The first person that she speaks to out of those two is Shannon in the parlor when she first appears. And then after that, every scene that Erika is in with Shannon and Cannon, both Shannon and Cannon together, and every time it's a problem as to where they are, they're always theoretically in the same place, such as when they're up in the dining hall or whatever, when the ring is handed over to Battler. So I think in episode 5, to Erika, there was no canon. That's what I'm claiming. And the thing that I want to bring up about this, because this is kind of tangential it might seem, is the reason that this happens, I think, is because the author of episode 5 didn't actually know the truth until Battler realized it at the end.
Wow.
So they weren't even writing with the perspective that it was possible that there was a person missing, or that, they weren't there together.
To add on to that, it could just be that something that's true in one game isn't true in another game. So if this theory that you're proposing may work for episode 6, maybe it just doesn't exist at all in episode 5 or any of the other episodes, or vice versa.
I mean, if you're claiming that it doesn't exist in other episodes, there's then the problem that why would we be trying to iron down a culprit across all games? I think the trick here basically is that the author is showing us Shannon and Cannon together when Erika only saw Shannon. And that part of the reason that episode 6 hinges on the fact that they are the same person. The mystery basically requires it to be the case. I think that's basically indicative of the writer, at least Hachijo in this case, being like, oh, I get it now. Look, here's something to prove that I get it.
Well, I guess I phrased that wrong. I think what I was trying to say there was more that maybe the game master, that you basically already said, maybe the game master was unaware if you think this is a true theory.
I was gonna point out, right at the beginning of episode 5, Ronove remarks on Lambda Delta's board that she can't do anything that is, against the rules necessarily. But she can disrespect the board, and she can, mess with stuff to the point where it doesn't even really look like the game anymore. He also remarks that Lambda Delta's board is one that is without love, which, Jokrono, I think sort of ties in a little bit with what you were saying. This board is one in which there isn't that love that is necessary to understand the whole Shannon Cannon being the same person type deal. Would you agree with that? Or,
I think that makes sense. I don't want to drag it back to being the episode 5 podcast Mark II, but I did want to raise the point that basically Erika has a very interesting arc across this story where I think that she is reflective of, because, in episode 5 and 6, she's a character that's thrust into the story out of nowhere. She apparently just disappeared somewhere near Rekenjim at the time, regarding the tips that she has at the end or whatever. So to an extent, the author clearly threw her in to try do something, to try prove something. And I think that it's almost the fact that Erika was used to try find the truth. But also that because Erika fails to see how the logic error is solved at the end, that it's indicative of the fact that the personality of Erika could never understand the significance of it, almost. Because tying it right back around, because I know this has been a bit of a tangent, that's what's important to the culprit, is why they've done all of this. And Erika is kind of, across episodes 5 and 6, proving that even if you understand what's happened, you don't necessarily understand the reasons for which it has happened. I hope that massive circle brought itself around in a way that made sense to you all.
No, it made sense.
But that was the point that I was trying to get to.
Speaking of the logic error, there's a lot to examine there.
Magus, I know you have strong feelings about this. I want you to kick us off.
Alrighty, I would love to. So basically, to recap, Battler gets himself stuck in a room for a very long time.
You just ended it like that.
That's basically it. But yeah, Erika basically tries to trap him in a logic error, which it's foreshadowed throughout the episode that a logic error is when there's a game between witches or witch and a human where the game master makes it so that basically it doesn't make sense. There's a problem with the narrative they're telling and the events that actually happened.
Can you ever think of any other work of fiction in which a guy just like accidentally getting himself stuck in a room because the chain is malfunctioning being so dramatic and daunting?
And it's super cool because it sets it up like right at the very beginning with the wedding scene, and then we don't know it's Battler at the time, but we have the there's someone in this dark room and they can't get out, and there's a witch outside, and it's all scary and shit.
It really makes the length of time that Battler was in that room feel a lot longer since we're experiencing through the whole episode.
It's very cool. But yeah, basically Battler gets stuck in a logic error, and he supposedly can't get himself out, and by the end of the story, Beatrice breaks him out. Beatrice figures out a solution to the logic error and breaks Battler out. The question...
Good job, Beatrice.
Nice work, Beatrice. The question that many people have...
I would love to hear what the newcomers thought of this.
Sure. You wanna jump on it?
In terms of did you find it entertaining?
Oh, so good.
Boring as heck. It was the best
It
moment.
was the most kind of, as you were saying earlier, it was very kind of force-fed to you, hey, this is a draft. Hey, have you heard of these logic errors? So it was kind of absolutely inevitable that it was coming, but I didn't put together until when it happened that what we were seeing with the horror scenes was actually Battler stuck in that logic error. So it was really cool when we got there in the end to be like, oh, that's what this is all about.
Yeah. When they walked into the room, that's when I realized with the background, I was like, oh shit.
What's really cool about it is that it very much leans on kind of game design, because there's a saying that in game design, the best way to make a game work is if the player understands all of the rules. And the best part is that you already know the game, the person reading the novel, us, we already know the game that Battler's gonna get stuck in this room. We've seen some of the rules. So that scene when Burn and Lambda are this is how it works. This is how the logic error works. You cannot leave while the chain is undone. It has to be chained, but the only way out is for you to cut yourself in little tiny pieces and flush yourself down the path. They really take their time with that scene, and because we understand the game and we're now being taught the fair rules, it's just such a horrifying scene. And it really reminds me of
this ain't no sort out online where Battler's just going to get access to the source code and hack his way out of the room.
Yeah. That scene has so much more weight because Lambda freaks out when he gets into that logic error, and he's like, oh, is it that bad? And then she starts
has her
having a momentary panic attack, and is like, wait, are you guys real? Am I still in this logic error?
Yeah, we all completely understand the ramifications of him getting stuck in this logic error. Now, the question that many people have is whether this really was Erika, trapping Battler, and then Beatrice, coming up with a solution and saving him, or is it that Battler planned this all out from the beginning and held back, his answer because he was, I would dare say, betting on a miracle, one might say, in the matter of a wizard from
If only there was precedent for that.
If only there was precedent for many other characters doing similar things. But I would definitely argue myself that Battler is putting himself in logic error. He knows full well. He's able to use the golden truth. He has to understand the story. He knows the truth. He knows that there is a way out for himself. And yet he doesn't take it because he's betting on Beatrice's resurrection and her return to him, which is what happens. I'd love to know if anyone disagrees.
I do find the counterpoint interesting that it's brought up that Battler doesn't want to unveil his final move because it will give away the heart of Beatrice. So I think if there is any reason that it is not all a ploy and that he was doing it on purpose, I think that is it, is that he didn't want to have to come to that.
I definitely agree.
But at the same time, I do agree that if that is not the case,
if anyone's
going to
reveal, Beatrice's heart, it's got to be themselves, right? They've got to unveil it themselves. That's my take on that scene, certainly.
I'm not going to get a chance to mention this again, so I'm just going to throw this in now. I freaking love the moment where, like, it's all really triumphant. It's like, yeah, Battler, you got through, you didn't get a logic error, and then, like, Delano just cuts in with that red of, like, Kyrie cannot save Battler.
Ushinomiya Kairi cannot save
Kairi,
Battler.
yes.
I lost it.
Yeah, and then, like, even Lambda's like, what the fuck? How do you do that?
That was like the first time in all of Umineko that I've had like legit rage at a character.
Who were you raging at, though?
Erika. Who else?
Oh god, no. I was raging at Battler the moment it faded to grey and was like, Kyrie comes down the corridor. I just walked back from the mic and I was like, he's fucked up! He's lost! He's screwed it up!
Because you were reading at the time, because we like read the voices out obviously for the playthrough, and he was halfway through a sentence and he started, like, Jokrono started slowing his lines down and he kind of looked at me like, this is bad.
Way back when Erika was running around investigating all of the crime scenes unsupervised, I'm like, she's fucking killing them. That's why she doesn't have the detective's authority.
You predicted
so the
that?
moment Kyrie appeared, I was like,
He totally did.
God
I can vouch
damn
for
it,
him.
Battler!
That's such a good twist.
I gave no
pretty good.
hints. He just was like, Erika is killing people. That's why she doesn't want to be the detective, because that's the only thing that the detective can't do.
You motherfucker, Jokrono.
He's a smart boy.
But like, holy crap, I completely agree, Aspie. What a moment. Like, because the whole thing is even if, like me, you pinged on what was about to happen, it didn't make that stop one character at a time, slow red truth any less impactful.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
it was brilliantly paced.
Yeah, because, like, even right at the second the first red truth hits, you know he's screwed basically no matter what he does, but the fact that they drag it out just makes it so much more painful.
Really good.
It's a really well written scene.
I haven't read Ryukishi's other works, but I know that a lot of his other stuff verges more on horror, and I think you can definitely feel his skill in that department coming out in that scene.
Oh yeah, this is like the most horror-centric episode since episode 1, I'd say.
It ain't no phone call though. It ain't no demon phone call.
Oh, yeah, the phone call was pretty
You're at Higanbana, guys. Shout out to Higanbana.
Yeah, shout out to Higanbana.
Higurashi.
I think the other interesting parallel there is the fact that if we are comparing Chick Beatrice as a, like, mask for the introduction story of our culprit, it's really interesting to consider the absence of Battler as the 1,000-year torture. You know, even though Battler is supposedly put in this torture this time, which is perhaps indicative of something else that I won't get into, but Seraphitic and I both agreed when we were coming up with culprit theories, separately, mind you, that Battler leaving the island is the reason the culprit is, like, love-stricken. It's kind of hinted at with the fact that the only times Shannon ever mentions the past is like, oh yeah, Battler said this thing and then never came back. And there's a whole bunch of, like, touchy clues like that, but I think it's really interesting to see the, like, eternal torture version of that story where it's like Beatrice is looking for every solution to try and get him back, and, you know, perhaps the inversion of roles, as I said, with Battler being the one tortured, but it's interesting to consider the implications of that in terms of a motive for the culprit.
It just so happens for Christmas that I got episode 2 manga, and rereading that scene where Battler and Beatrice declare that they're going to torture each other eternally sort of takes on a whole new meaning.
Oh my god, you're totally right. I hadn't even thought of that. It's brilliant.
That scene, I mean, that scene's one of my favorites, but it is interesting to see how sort of the torturing each other just sort of by their both their existence together and their existence apart is kind of an interesting theme throughout this episode and other episodes. At the beginning, Battler is tortured by Beatrice's presence, and now that, you know, and then when he gets locked away, Beatrice is tortured by his absence. kind of an interesting little parallel. But anyway.
Now, I think most of us here probably have a vague idea of what your answer is, but I want to hear you guys answer the logic error. Who wants to take this? Seraphitic or
Seraphitic,
Felix?
take it because he's the master and commander that first brought it to the podcast. I came up with it months later on my own for the playthrough, but I think Seraphitic should follow through with his deadly blow.
Seraphitic.
All right,
Protagonist.
so the answer that we have for who is the culprit today on this glorious game board, Shannon and Canon, or Sio as we've been calling them, are in fact the same person. There are multiple red truths and lots of pieces of the story that point to this fact. We theorize, both Jokrono and I, that this person, Sio, fell in love with Battler early on, prior to Battler leaving, and this would be hinted at sort of by the chick Beatrice being born as sort of another personality that Shannon develops or Sio develops. And this personality's whole existence is simply to love and please Battler. And so over the 6 years, she develops into the character that we know and love as Beatrice, and that we see in the first half of Umineko. Along with this, we believe that Sio is most probably one of a line of Beatrices. Jokrono and I also agree that there's probably about 3. There was probably an original Beatrice that Kinzo met early on, post World War II, most likely, whom he developed a relationship with, had a child with, and then this child also had a child that we know as Sio. Jokrono, those are sort of the main points. Would you care to flesh out some of the other points that you've sort of made along the way?
So I think the main things to point out is that along the way we've kind of seen all of these different personalities, both magical and non-magical. We have the 3 main personalities, Shannon, Canon, and Beatrice. But then we also have Zephyr and Furfur, this time representing, how...
I haven't even talked about those two.
Yeah, how...
Love.
Sio came to view love as, like, the work of demons. That it is this great trial that they have to fight through.
Yeah.
I think that's also going back to especially episodes 1 and 2, where, like, when in the locked room with Shannon, George, and Goda, Beatrice just goes into a frenzy when when Shannon brings up love. And how through their worldview this character has come to have this twisted perception. Even though, as we've been speaking about a fair bit, like, magic is used as escapism or a way to cope for various people, this way to cope kind of became corrupted. And there's also all of these other characters like Bronove, Vigilia, the Stakes, Garp, that, probably were at one point other parts of the escapist comforting fantasy that have now also become these murder bots. I'm trying to think if there's any detail that I have missed, but there is definitely...
What happens at the end of every game?
Oh!
You should get the credit for this,
right.
because you discovered...
Aspie, I don't know if you want to edit the clip in here, but...
Oh yeah, let's absolutely include it.
So here's a little clip for you.
Yeah.
And then let's go here and just
execute.
Kill.
Just keep going.
Erika's in red.
Oh, that's a fun one. Peter Erika, fell from a pleasure boat and is currently missing. Due to the Rekenjima explosion incident that occurred shortly after, don't say anything, her accident went completely forgotten. Her family says that she might have drifted to Rekenjima and gotten involved in the accident, but no evidence suggesting that she was ever on the island could be found. Forgers who knew of this accident often theorized that she drifted onto Rekenjima and included her in the illusion of the witch.
Well, I was not expecting this to be the place.
I know, it's just there. There was an explosion.
God. OMG, Seraphitic, the island exploded! I was shocked. I think it was one of the theories that was more crackpot and crazy that had kind of built up to the point where I was confident that it was true.
Anybody who's listening to like audio only, we just need to explain. This is like at the character select screen after the end of the game. If you execute Erika, you get this little bit of text that says
the Rakendrima explosion incident. So yeah, Seraphitic came up with this again long before I did. But then when I was going through after episode 3, I was talking about how like all of the people that make it to the second midnight die the same way in the game record. And Seraphitic also brought up the evidence of the Rose Garden looking less good and how you can make explosives with fertilizer. And there's a whole bunch of hints here and there, and also Rosa at the end of episode 2 running away from the cloud of gold and black butterflies and goats and whatnot.
This is definitely the detail that I am most proud of. I mean, forget the culprit thing. Jokrono finding that is amazing. I would never have found that, so props to Jokrono.
I didn't think it was gonna happen. I said at the end of the episode 5 podcast, I didn't think we were gonna get answers, but there's an answer. It's sitting there, hidden away, where you don't even need to see it if you're not paying attention to the tips.
Yeah, I think this might be the most generous like little tip you can find in the menus that they just hide away.
My expectations were so shattered by the fact that it was even there at all.
Yeah.
It just appears out of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like in your clip you're saying, like, I didn't expect this to be the place we find them.
Yeah, and like, Seraphitic's brought up that he thinks that maybe the culprit was making them. I've brought up that maybe there are explosives left over in a bunker below the island, because that's where the gold seems to be. We're not sure about that.
We have slightly different interpretations.
Truth be told, it's probably a mix of the two.
That could be, definitely. And I mean,
I would say I don't think we're going to get an answer for it, but I also didn't think we were going to get the explosion answer in the first place. So, I mean, who knows?
I honestly think that it's kind of irrelevant whether or not, it's a fertilizer bomb or a bunker or both. It's kind of like, the fact remains that, like, we do know now there was an explosion. Almost certainly it's an intentional explosion that Sayo sets up. I mean, well, we can discuss that, Aspie, if you wish to.
Just like, I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's kind of like a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but there have been a lot of foreshadowing for this. Like, we have like the whole thing about only Maria's jawbone being able to be found, about how like the mansion was inaccessible like all that time, and they had to go around the back.
Shout out to that one time. Shout out to that one time in episode 4 where Angie arrives at the island and it's like, Angie looked over the cliff. I know that was the moment for me where I was like, why is she looking over a cliff and not at the mansion?
Yeah.
what is happening there?
The moment for me when I sort of was like, when I put together that there was probably an explosion was when they talk about the accident, and I was like, what accident? I mean, I could hardly call like a bunch of mass murders where people get stabbed with stakes an accident. So yeah, but anyway, yes, like you said, Aspie, in some ways it's a bit of a not super important, but it is nice to have this vindication for Jokrono.
No. Major kudos for figuring that out, guys.
Woo! I offer you my explosive applause to you all.
It's nice that the story actually gives us an answer. And
I mean,
congratulate you for a theory.
The thing that then blows my mind is what the hell happens next? Because I was like, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna have a couple more game boards, drop a few hints, and then eventually it'll end up having to be one culprit or another. But then episode 6 made it that way. So what the hell's next? Where did we
It's
go?
just like, yeah, the story's over now, guys. Everyone go home.
Without wanting to dive into expectations for episode 7, I mean, episode 6 gives us the expectations for episode 7.
I mean, yeah, it's like I want to look at the answers,
It
but
does.
but
like-
looking at the answers, Rikishi's not going to do that, right?
Burn was tearing out the guts.
Oh my god, I was blown away by that line. I was like, that can't happen. Whew.
Yeah. I mean, even in episode 6, we get the conclusion of, we arguably get the conclusion of Battler and Beatrice's and Erika's arcs, like the arcs, like character arcs, like the most important characters that we're seeing kind of right now.
I
They
feel like
all
they're
get concluded, you know, with the marriage and Erika's cast into oblivion. Like, all the characters that we've been following for all this time seem to have wrapped up. Like,
Oh yeah, that's the other detail we didn't
still got
cover.
a whole quarter
is
of the story.
OMG, there are still only 17 people with Erika.
Oh yeah, that's a thing.
We're kind of jumping around a lot here.
We are.
Now, yeah, there's only 17 people. That's kind of a huge thing.
That might be my favorite singular moment in the entire story thus far.
That was the money shot right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like the fact that you had like Battler and Beatrice finishing each other's lines. It felt a lot like Zipper and Furfur kind of there. Like
Yeah.
that whole scene. I was talking with Magus a bit about this. The whole finale felt like a play. It just felt like it's so melodramatic and so over the top, and like everyone was just like really getting into their characters. Erika was playing the role of the villain so splendidly up until the last moment. It was like it just felt like a play. I don't know what to say about that.
I mean, a lot of this episode felt like a play. Like, the love duel feels like a play with Zephyr and Furfur commentating. Erika, I mean, I don't know if we're ready to jump into Erika yet, but like, Erika, you know, embraces the role of the villain even after her master disappears. Like, everyone is fully committed to seeing this through to the very bitter end. And it's just, mwah, it's beautiful.
It was great.
I have a question real quick for Seraphitic and Jokrono. So, in that final duel, when Battler and Beatrice say that with Erika included, there's only 17 people, right before, Erika says in red that she's the 18th person. And in fourth, when Battler tries to say something in red that's incorrect, he chokes on it. So why doesn't Erika choke there?
Well, I think it depends on how you're using the word person. Yeah, I think it's like, I am Furude Erika, the detective, and the 18th person.
Let me rephrase this. Let me quote this. Hi, pleased to meet you. I am Furude Erika, the detective. I may be invited to guest, but please welcome me. I am the visitor, the 18th human on Rekenjima. And then Battler says, even if you join us, that makes 17 humans.
I mean, I don't want to comment on this. I want the two newbies to try and puzzle this one out, but that's just me.
I suppose the other thing is that the whole thing when Battler choked on it is that he couldn't say something that was untrue. From the view of the culprit viewing themselves as two different people, it is still true that there is another person on the island. It's like an interesting question on the rules of the red that you could raise there.
Didn't Battler believe that he was Asuma's son? Like,
Yeah.
how
I
does
mean,
that
the red
work?
has always been kind of finicky.
Well, no,
So-
that's the thing, Ben, is he says, I am Asumu's son, but isn't able to say that he was born of her.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Yes,
the whole point.
My bad.
I don't think it's so much of a problem. It's definitely, I mean, it's a word game. The red has been word games the whole way through. I think the point is you cannot state things that are like objectively untrue. I mean, we can fight on it for ages, but I think the resolution of that scene is nonetheless the same. You know, the fact that Erika says she's the 18th person is less about, oh, hey, I'm actually the 18th person, and more about, oh, look at what the next line is. But, you know, back with the Asumu thing, he's not able to say that he was born of Asumu, and that is like a physical truth more than the human perspective, where, like, the assignment of human furniture and people in this game has very much been chalked down to how people see themselves.
Plot twist, witches and magic were real the whole time. No, I'm just kidding.
I will say, actually, Chrono Trigger does raise a good point, is that Erika describes herself as the detective in red, but apparently she doesn't have the detective's authority, so what's going on there?
What does it mean for her to say that she is the 18th person and the detective? Like, what does that mean?
I think that the fact that she's the detective is her meta character saying that she's the detective. That was actually the quote that led me to the whole thing about episode 5, where Erika on the game board, her piece wouldn't have actually seen two separate people. that was what led me to the whole idea that maybe the red truth applies somewhat separately to the meta characters and the game board characters. So by saying that she is the detective in that scene doesn't necessarily make it a problem that she didn't have the detective's authority and killed people. But, I don't know. At the same time, I also feel like it's just Ryukishi trying to make that 17 humans line ridiculously impactful and maybe twisting his own rules a little bit for the sake of a bit of pizzazz.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely... I think it's meant to obviously be like something of a contradiction. And I mean, we've already seen some ways that the red is been oddly used. I think this is another instance of red being either twisted insanely, or maybe there's a little bit more to the red than we're necessarily giving it credit for. But I think we should move on.
We have a logic error that still needs solving.
Yeah. How did Beatrice solve the logic error, guys? Tell us. Tell us,
You got through the whole culprit thing, but then we never actually said how the logic error was resolved.
No, not at all. Please tell us step by step how it was solved.
All right. So
What happens?
Obviously, if Shannon and Kennen are the same person, then Kennen was never in that other room to begin with.
The cousin's room, I believe.
Whichever one it was, I forget.
Yeah. Sayo.
But Seraphitic was, and it said in red that he was in that room.
Pardon?
No, it didn't!
Said everyone else was in that room.
Yeah, it said.
Magus, you weren't meant to say that. I was leading them up to answer that.
No, my bad.
Oh, geez, that was a tough one, Aspie. I really had to think hard about that one.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so Shannon, aka Sayo, is definitely in the room where Erika left. Sayo leaves that room through the window, which we do not see sealed, and goes down to the mansion, possibly in sort of canon mind mode, whatever. Goes up to the room that Battler was locked in, opens the door, lets Battler out while Erika is messing around with her water park, and Battler exits the room. Kennen re-locks the door, goes into the cupboard, and changes to one of the other personalities. Therefore, Kennen was not in the room anymore, because Kennen is no longer existing, really. Now it's Shannon, or Beatrice, or whatever personality Sayo chooses to adopt.
The witch in the wardrobe.
The other
Yeah,
thing
exactly.
I love about that is that after Cannon dies in the meta, when he is shot in the head with a pistol, he appears on the game board as a ghost, which completely explains his appearance at the end of episode 3, which was what put me on this whole pain train of multiple personality culprits in the first place.
Oh man, yeah, there's so many links to episode 3, and other episodes as well. But yeah, so essentially, the idea is Battler and Beatrice are playing a word game. Beatrice says, Kennen doesn't exist anywhere in this room, and Erika WTFs and loses. Because
It's very convenient that it was a duel. Like, it feels like if Erika had more moves to make, like if she was a bit more moves, she might have been able to counter it. But because it was only like one shot, you get this or you're dead. It was game over for her.
She still gets multiple shots, regardless.
I love Erika.
I would argue that probably Erika wouldn't ever get the right answer.
Why though?
Maybe.
Well, Beatrice tells Battler that in order to understand the answer, you need love. And we've seen time and time again that Erika is a character who has no love. So, I mean, that's just sort of my own thinking as to, whether Erika could ever actually understand the answer. I doubt it.
Okie Flare, Magus, with me on this?
Is it time?
I'm scared. I'm officially
Unleashed.
scared. I am
I
locking
don't
my
know
door
what you're talking about.
from the
We can
inside.
neither confirm nor deny whether your theory is correct. However, we can all safely say that we agree with your interpretation.
Yay! Hello. Yep, EP6 very heavily leans on Chicanentress. It is a fun thing, and I agree. I agree with the interpretation. I don't think it's impossible. I want to be very clear. I do not think it's impossible to construct another answer, but I do think that if you are paying attention to the themes, paying attention to the characters, seeing what they do, particularly the love trial, and I'm sure that Jokrono will make a joke about this, but there are a number of sequences in the love trial where the characters are described as doing things in unison.
Shout out to that one scene in episode 5 where Erika is like, hey, you there, close the door. And both Shannon and Cannon reply at the same time and close the door at the same time.
Yep. There's a lot of characters doing things in unison. Zephyr and Furf are obviously also doing a similar thing. And they had the whole unspecified gender thing. Like, I entirely agree with the Chicanentress explanation at this point. Although, back when I was reading it, I had not reached the Triss part. I thought that it was Chicanen and they were separate from Beatrice for some reason up until this episode. I had not quite puzzled things out as well as you guys have.
I was not on the ball.
Where were you? I'm curious.
It took me until the end of episode 6 to really get it.
Right.
Oh, see, I was slower than all of y'all. I didn't get it until the end of episode 7.
Seeing Seraphitic reach its answer early episode 4, or was it late episode 3?
Jokrono.
That was fucking crazy.
I've heard it's possible to reach such an answer by the end of episode 2.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And veterans have theorized you could do it by the end of episode 1, but I have never seen anyone do that. That's insane.
I mean, there's some foreshadowing in episode 1 that now that I know the answer, that it's like, oh, of course. But
yeah, one of the things for me was that during not just the game boards in general, but when we see characters getting murdered, Ken and Shannon are always incredibly heroic. So the way that I was approaching the story was, why would if this is an author, if Beatrice is authoring this tale, why would the author want to make these characters appear incredibly heroic? Oh, because oh right, I see why you want me to think these guys are heroes. I understand completely now. And that kind of clicked somewhere in episode 4 when they started talking about, oh, this is our role for this episode. It's a bit weird different from usual. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much about previous episodes by myself, because we have 2 newbies here to talk about it, but I am 100% on board with this theory going forward.
Yeah.
That's kind of the beauty of the cat box of Umineko, though. You can just have so many different things, and none of it's wrong and none of it's right. And it's almost like an empty sandbox.
It's very interesting. It's a very interesting way of going about things, but I think that that's kind of the point of EP6, is that even if you can come up with an answer that makes some sense, the point is to see things with love.
This isn't us being invasive here. This is just, we're being honest here.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to talk about things.
Despite my whole reaction over the explosion thing, I still don't think we're going to get much of an answer as we go forward. It doesn't feel in the vein of the story that we will get a set, this is the answer. I'm very interested to see where that goes from here.
I'm pretty sure that much like episode 6, I mean, even if you, at the end of episode 6, if you don't, it's strongly hinting at Ken and Shannon being the same person, and Beatrice being the same person as well, but that's a little bit more vague, but it's strongly hinting that Ken and Shannon are the same person, but it doesn't come right out and tell you. It doesn't say that in red, Kenan and Shannon are the same person.
You still have to actually think it out.
I feel like most of the answers are going to be the same in episode 7. If
At any
there
rate,
are.
I feel like relying on the red truth too much to determine anything in this story is just going to be a handicap for you.
Oh yeah, no.
As we've established, the red truths can be fucked around with a lot.
Yeah, no, Jokrono, I mean, you and I both know that, and, we definitely don't only rely on red truth.
Unlike a certain other character.
Yeah, I mean, my game at the moment has actually been looking at what Magus was saying is, why the hell are things written this way?
Mm-hmm.
What is the design?
Yeah.
Going right back to episode 3, which I just finished editing, the whole question of why were Rose's sleeping pills brought up at all? And then I was like, all right, this has to tie in somewhere, and that helped me solve one of the murders there, I think. There's a whole bunch of details like that where I really have to question, why would we be shown these things if not the case? Why would Shannon and Cannon raise their hands at the same time or get a similar mark on their hands in episode 2 if that's not important?
There really are many people that go through the entirety of Umineko and do ignore anything that isn't in red because they don't trust it.
Yeah.
They feel like they're just going to be betrayed.
I mean, they even say in red, you can't trust anything that's not in red. Atlas says that back in EP4.
And Erika says it too.
Episode 6 very much hammers this in. It's just like, Erika is a tragic character who was unable to approach this story with, like, respect to the author.
Yeah.
Erika's an incredibly interesting example. I really love looking back at her character, because if we're taking this to be like a story that is written, Erika's tragedy isn't just that she, has no love. It's also that if we kind of take a step back and we talk about the fact that like the Forgers write her in supposedly because she fell from a boat, like we apparently don't actually have any evidence that she was on the island at all, which is why she's in the first 4 episodes. She's just a character. Everyone's like, what if she is a crazy detective person and she killed everyone or something? Like her tragedy is that she's not really a person. She's kind of like Kinzo in the way that Kinzo is dead from day one, and anything that we see about Kinzo is like not like it's based on memories and things that are written down and hearsay and that sort of thing. And it's the same with Erika. Like she's written to be the villain because somebody has to be the villain. It really ties in with the way that Chick Beardo was created to love Battler, whereas Erika kind of parallels her in that Erika was created to hate and to fight Battler. That's her entire purpose. And she, even when Byrne leaves, that's all she has. And so she fucking sticks with it, right? She has nothing else. Even when Battler's like, here's your duct tape because you're the detective and that's what matters to you. Like, Erika knows that her role in this story is just as much the detective, the 18th person, the detective, as it is the villain. And that's why she totally commits to the role. I find it fascinating as a commentary on, like, a villain who's written in a story, right? Like, if you go to any other written piece of media, there's always a villain. And it's like, why does this character have to be the villain? Because somebody has to be the villain, so Erika might as well be. It's such an interesting little piece of commentary on story writing, which is what I found, and personally, this is what I really, like, find interesting about Umineko as somebody who likes to tell stories with my friends and, like, make stuff up on the fly, improv. Like, that's her tragedy, is that she is a character who is being written, in my mind. Whether by, an actual author or by Byrne. I really like Erika as a character. Even though I despise her, I just love her role in the story so much.
You despise her but appreciate her.
Absolutely. She is a flawlessly designed character.
Yeah, Erika is the Dolores Umbridge of Umineko.
No, I was going to say, I brought up a point at the end of the episode 5 podcast where Aspie was like, oh man, it's kind of, I didn't like that Natsui didn't get her moment of, like, appreciation after she'd been proven innocent. And I feel like this point about Erika is exactly the same about Natsui is then, where it's like, of course she doesn't get her moment. She's dead. She's been written this way.
Rude. But yeah, like, she's a supporting character. Even though she gets the spotlight, she is a supporting character to Battler vs. Erika, right? That's their roles.
Yeah, and that's the tragedy.
It's very interesting.
Speaking of things being written...
Oh god. I knew we were going to segue. I knew this was going to happen! I knew this was going to happen!
Oh my god!
No! Put it back
I
in the
can't
box.
believe it
Put
did
it
it!
back in.
Bro, took you this long to get it out.
Oh god.
I have never reacted so physically to a story
It's true.
as that screenshot that I posted on the thread of Angie saying, just like the other ones that she wrote. Because at the same time, it was both saying, hey, you're right, they were written, but also, screw you, you're not there yet.
Yes, child of man.
Oh my god, I would have given the clip of that moment for the podcast, but it's legitimately me there for 15 minutes holding myself and shaking.
Yeah. He just screamed. He just kept screaming, and I had to calm him down. I think we were patting the back.
Like,
It's gonna be a highlight.
there are a lot of clues going back, looking like, oh hey, episodes 1 and 2 were written down in these message bottles, and then there's this whole culture of people investigating them and trying to theorize what happened, and all of that nonsense in episode 4, and then also the fact that Battler starts narrating at the beginning of episode 3 in Purgatory. So many clues. I'm so mad and I'm so happy.
I haven't heard like many people at all figuring that out early. That was fucking impressive.
Figuring out that there's another author for episodes 3 onwards.
Yep. This was one of the things that I was incredibly impressed and picked up on.
Yeah, Jokrono, top props for you for that. That was a good piece of detective work. One thing that you proposed, Jokrono, in the episode 5 podcast, I think, was that Battler was the author.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
I'm gonna be right back. I need to defrost some chicken.
What?
Is that a euphemism for the torture I'm about to go through?
Oh
Okay.
god. I need to frost the torturing chicken.
I hope that makes the podcast cut. Let's
Please
go.
no.
Take us away, Seraphitic.
So Jokrono, you said that Battler might be the author. We are now shown that Hachijo Toya is the author. So you are abandoning your Battler theory?
God,
or-
no.
Yeah,
would've
that's what I
banned
like to
anything?
hear.
Get out of here.
Stick to your guns, Jokrono.
I am an angry man over what Ryukishi has done to me. But if I don't fight him, I will never win.
Fuck facts. We're going with theories.
Basically, I'm sticking with my guns because I feel like it's more entertaining that way, truth be told. I would not be surprised if I'm wrong. But there is just enough foreshadowing when Hachijo is introduced for there to be another person involved with the writing of the stories.
Yes, thank you.
The male assistant and the fact that it's a man that showed up to the convention and the fact that Hachijo is hiding in the back screams to me that Rikushi has left just enough room for there still to be someone else.
Thank you so much.
I still think it's going to be Battler.
Yes.
And the other thing is that episodes 5 and 6, where Erika is introduced, are the only two that start with the stylistic choice thus far of the ending being at the beginning and then going back to it. It screams of a different authorship style in the same way that episode 3 and 4 screamed to me something else is going on. There is a very tangible difference in flavor. Shout out to Aspirity's chicken.
Interesting.
Get out.
And I think, whilst, again, I won't be surprised if I'm wrong, I'm still gonna stick with my guns because there is just enough room for it to still work. And I'm terribly excited.
See, the thing that has converted me to your way of thinking, Jokrono, was actually the introduction of Hachijo. More than anything else, the fact that we have this brand new character who we're supposed to believe authored this series of other notes is like beyond anything that I would believe. I mean, one of Nox's red truths, I guess just one of his rules, is that the culprit has to be someone that is introduced early. Now, this isn't exactly the same thing, but I also believe that we should know the author before episode 6. I mean, that seems kind of stupid. It sounds like a stupid decision if oh yeah, here's this author that you would have no way to know is the author. Like, if they had mentioned someone called Hachijo Toya prior to episode 6, if they had even snuck her name in prior to episode 6, just somewhere in the thing. But she is not. She's nowhere in Umineko beforehand.
What if Hachijo is Battler?
That's sort of what we're saying. But the thing is, I cannot believe that the author would be someone that just appears out of thin air that has absolutely zero connection to the story prior to this moment.
I do think that Hachijo is a real character and does exist, but I think her role in the story is very different. Ryukishi has very much through everything, in my opinion, been playing a game where everything is both a red herring and a clue. I think that it is the red herring that Hachijo is the author for all of episodes 3 to 6, but also a clue that Hachijo is an author. So, just to clarify, because someone in the voice chat asked, I think that episodes 3 and 4 were written by Battler, 5 and 6 were by Hachijo, and episodes 1 and 2 were by the Culprit.
I mean, I'm not sure exactly who the authorship is. Like you said, I mean, it makes sense the way that you said it. The thing is, though, I do believe that Battler has probably been an author for one of these, at least. It makes no sense to just introduce this random author that apparently has no connection to the story prior to this point, aside from just authoring things. It's bizarre. It would be I think it would be terrible writing on Ryukishi's part.
I don't want to agree with you on that point in case we're wrong.
I mean,
I don't think we will be. But the other thing is, it's so perfect that all of these weird tricks of the story that could only be done in writing and visuals now finally make sense that we know that it's written down. Things like the red truth, the blue truth, the gold truth. You can't speak in gold. If you can, I'd love to know how. Please teach me.
You just need the little sound effect. Just make the little sound effect before.
Just carry a soundboard with me at all times.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past your
Easy.
But it is so nice to have an understanding of how these aspects of the story work to the characters in them. It also raises a heap of interesting questions, like I brought up in the episode 5 podcast and the forum discussion thread, about how much is actually in the writings. I think everything is in the writings.
That's insanity. Insanity, my friend.
You can disagree with me if you want.
I disagreed with you about whether the meta was in the story prior to episode 6. In episode 5 I disagreed with you. Now I'm sort of more on the fence. I think there's definitely evidence for that being the case now. I'm not gonna say one way or the other because I just don't know. But I do definitely think that you have a very strong position in saying that the meta is now in the story and isn't just something outside of what's been written down.
My goodness. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything else you want to bring up about the whole authorship thing. I feel like I beat it to death in the episode 5 thread, and there are still a whole bunch of questions I raised about like what certain things in the story would mean in a meta sense.
We had to have a discussion at that point. It was like, do we let Jokrono say this and like spoil this?
Fucking yes.
We've already spoiled enough shit before now, so let's go all the way.
I suppose this point is a good point to talk about Featherine.
Let's do it.
Who is she?
I feel like Featherine is a character who works much better in theory than she does in practice.
Could you elaborate, Flare?
I'd love to hear this opinion.
I'm scared.
Like this idea of like this one creator being who's bigger than Lambda Delta and bigger than Burn Castell, and just this big person who's above everybody. And I don't know, I just feel like Ryukishi doesn't exactly do the best job putting her into the story in a way that's relevant and works, per se.
Well, I said I was declaring war on Seraphitic, but it looks like it's your turn, Flare.
Yay!
So, the whole thing is that
Fight.
from the end of episode 3, and even some foreshadowing before that, we were told that Beatrice was made a witch by the witches on the tier above her, being Lambda Delta and Burn Castle. They accepted her, and, you know, she was made a witch by them. So then there is already the precedent that on the tier above, another witch is able to make Burn Castle and Lambda Delta a witch. And in the authorship theory, it makes perfect sense that to like disguise their identity and weave their way into the story, they have to become part of the aspects of the story where the witches represent certain rules of the game board. Much like how Chick Beatrice was an embodiment of those rules, we can also talk about how Hachijo is the embodiment of the rules of authorship. Lambda Delta and Burn Castle being, you know, the rules of certainty and miracles and how you can factor them in. Like, if everything was resolved because of some miraculous chance in this story, it'd feel really cheap. Or if there was no risk and everything was certain, then it wouldn't be significant.
Shout out to Battler groping Shannon back in episode 1.
Oh my god, right?
Shout out.
Like, I think that it ties itself together really nicely. I think that Featherine plays an important role in this story, and I find the question of why she wrote herself into this one a really interesting question. And something that is, you know, the little bit of bait to keep you going through episodes 7 and 8 if you weren't already convinced that there was enough of a mystery to keep you going. Because, you know, episode 6 kind of answers a whole bunch of the mysteries, much to my surprise. And it's throwing in a little extra question in the mix. But I don't know. I think that Featherine has a really cool role in this podcast. And the other one that I brought up in the thread is Augustus Aurora. Is such a perfect name. Here's the thing, is there are all of these allusions to Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy, in which Virgilia, is the guide to Beatrice, the guide to the answers. And Virgil was the author of the Aeneid, which was a Roman epic poem, which a lot of historians credit as being a propaganda piece for Emperor Augustus. I don't think that is an accident.
I mean, it is very random that they chose like a name like Augustus. Like...
Exactly. They gave a female character the name of an old Roman emperor. Like, that doesn't just happen.
I don't know, I imagine she just throws a dartboard at the wall and just, you know, Augustus, let's go. Servio, let's go. You know, that's how Richie writes, right?
Of course.
That's proven.
That's what Byrne represents, is the miracle of when the story actually fits together at all.
Yeah. I don't think Richie puts much thought into his scenes at all, yeah.
But yeah, I think that is significant of Hachijo being the one that is like the benefactor for the story existing. The one that, and I think that Vigilia and Erika, which are originally meant to be Vigilius in Land of the Golden Witch, it makes sense that those two characters are on the behalf of Hachijo, Augustus, the benefactor of Virgil. I think that is completely on purpose.
I mean, they did have a scene where Vigilia and Featherine were talking, didn't they? When Vigilia entrusts the chick Beatrice to Featherine, they have that whole scene. They have a relationship.
Seem to know each other.
Okay, so Jokrono, I do agree that Featherine in the concept of Featherine is not a poor one. I don't disagree that Featherine has a purpose. What I don't like is how she's been implemented.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
But I have slightly different reasons from Flare. I remember talking with Carafian about some of this when I first got through the scene where Featherine is introduced. So one of the things that has sort of frustrated me is kind of how Ryukishi has been seemingly antagonizing his viewers.
Seemingly?
I find that entirely amusing.
I can't be alone here, right? Ryukishi is trying to piss us off.
I mean, have you read episode 3? Half of the story is like, you dummies. It's an unreliable narrator. Figure it out.
I mean, but that's a whole lot, like, Virgilia is doing it in, like, a nice, kind way. Right now, Ryukishi is basically saying, like, okay, first we have in episode 5, Erika being there, as a caricature of readers who are just trying to find the truth and not really looking at the story and, only ever trying to be detectives,
Well, it's not just about finding the truth for Erika, it's about finding a truth you can beat someone else down with.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's what we saw in EP6.
But that's how Ryukishi is characterizing those kinds of readers. And then in episode 6, we have Featherine, who is there beating down all the kinds of readers who just want to enjoy a story without really having to think about it. I understand where Ryukishi is coming from as an author of a mystery novel. I can imagine that you would want people to try and solve your mystery and not just read it for kicks and giggles. But, like, it frustrates me that Ryukishi isn't letting the readers of his story read the story as they would like. He's basically saying, if you're not reading it the way I want you to read it, you're either like Erika, who is someone who has no love and just is an intellectual rapist trying to disrespect my story, or you're a lazy piece of shit and you're not putting in the effort that you should be putting in because isn't my story great? Now look, I could be overreaching with some of this, but it feels like Ryukishi is making the readers read how he wants, and if you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. And I don't think that there should be a wrong way to enjoy a story. And I think that that is a problem.
I definitely agree with that there, especially, and that's why I take issue with how she's implemented, because she does feel kind of shoehorned in. He's kind of being more delicate with Virgilia in episode 3, like, okay, here's how I would recommend you doing this, and with Featherine, it's like, no, you're doing it this way. And that's why I think she's much more of an awkward character, like, in context.
But the thing is, by the end of episode 6, Featherine does turn to Angie and tell her that she's been a wonderful Miko. This is the thing. I think that, like, absolutely Featherine is written to be like a kind of a snarky, sassy character who's like, child of man, come think, you're not thinking hard enough. But, like, I don't think that she's an exact approximation of Ryukishi himself. She is in some ways like an insert for that, for like, hey reader, I can see that you're not like reading into everything in my story and I would like you to think harder. I just think maybe she could have been a little bit nicer, but I don't know. I think it adds to her as being an interesting character who isn't just another Vigilia. But I do think that by the end, Featherine very much does say like, hey Angie, I see that you haven't understood everything perfectly, but that's okay. You were a wonderful, splendid Miko. By the end of the episode, at least, I don't think that Ryukishi is saying that if you don't think hard enough, that you're wrong, but that he would like you to. He's not telling us like you have to understand everything and go the extra mile. He's saying he would like us to.
I think it's more that he just wants people to try than it is he wants them to understand it.
Yes, it's more important that you appreciate the story. Like Angie, thinks about the story and says some things that, people have been, I can't think of any examples, but she says stuff that like Jokrono has said to me ages ago about like, love seems to be very important in this story. It's also kind of a catch-up method in the same way that EP3 was, but like, Featherine by the end appreciates Angie and says, you were a splendid Miko, I would love to have you again.
Yeah, and the main feature of Angie that she compliments is the fact that she didn't give up even though she didn't understand.
Yes. Absolutely.
Featherine's trying to push her to understand, but that's not like
but it's okay
everything.
It's not the end of the world if you don't understand everything in the story. Like, there's always crazy stuff there, but you don't have to.
But I wasn't saying that, like, Ryukishi is mocking his readers for not understanding. I mean, that would be one thing. Like, that's just sort of a feature of witches. I feel like Ryukishi is forcing readers to read how he wants, and if you're not, basically, Featherine is complimenting Angie because Angie is reading how Featherine wants.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, to use Featherine's word, Angie is actively reading it. He wants him, like, readers to actively get involved. But sometimes, like, you just want to read a damn good story.
I mean, yeah, it's a game, right?
But you don't miss out on anything. That's the whole thing. Is, like, he's pushing and he's saying, read actively. This is a good way to do things. But his concluding point is that you don't have to. Like,
yeah, you don't have to.
Featherine is kind of meant to be a challenging character in my eyes. But the fact that Featherine understands that it's not the point is part of why she's a good character in the story. She's built up as an antagonist, sassy character, but then brings it back around and says, I was doing this to push you. Thank you for sticking with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's all about that, like, trusting the author that they have, written this story and that we're meant to try and understand it.
I mean, like, I just want to address what Seraphitic's saying here, because, like, this is a concern that lots of people have with the story, and you're definitely not alone in feeling that this way. But then I think that also is very much up to the reader's interpretation, whether they want to take Featherine as more of an antagonist towards the reader, or as more of a nurturing figure. Like, that's really up for interpretation, but I'm not saying you're wrong in your interpretation, but
It's a fine line to walk.
it definitely pissed some people off. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could fall either way depending on the reader. So I can fully appreciate Jokrono and Magus that it didn't feel that way to you, but it did to me.
You know, and yeah, like I sorry, I don't mean to like do the thing where I trample over your opinion. We're here to discuss this as friends and comrades in arms.
Yeah. No. You don't have to worry about that.
I just get very passionate sometimes. But sometimes I'm also calm, and that's what makes me human. All right, so...
I don't think you are ever calm.
Just you.
Yeah, that's
Confirmed
debatable.
furniture.
We could argue about that for like 10 minutes.
So Magus, I have a question for you.
Oh,
Speaking of characters
do you?
with two different personality sides,
Yeah.
is that the hammiest introduction I could give you to what you wanted to talk about?
Oh, do we want to talk about the love duel?
I would love
Is
to
that what
talk
you're-
about it.
Yes, can we
Suggesting-
please segue into that?
Seamless.
There's so much to unpack in the whole love trial.
So yeah, love duel. So
Yeah,
love duel's
like what we
pretty
were
cool.
having.
It's a huge part of this novel. It's something that Erika seems to completely ignore. And it's how Shannon and Cannon become human by the end. Yeah, I mean, we see all these characters and their trials back and forth, but it's all resolved right at the end with Shannon and Cannon facing off against each other with two guns that look exactly alike, and they end up in a position where, because Cannon acts contrary to his regular character, being the calm, cool guy, and fires the gun rapidly, and then Shannon, who's normally the emotional, loving one, plays the logical decision to throw herself to the ground. And it all culminates in this beautiful moment where we have the two facing each other, opposing each other in the same glorious image, with these two guns that on the outside look exactly the same, but both of them can feel, as the gun is placed against their heads, that they are both completely different.
Not to mention the kick-ass music.
Of course. Fucking amazing. Alive and Life and all that shit. All amazing tracks. I want to touch on something. I don't want to go too far into it because obviously this is in all of Umineko. But I want to talk briefly about how the themes of alchemy and Buddhism kind of tie into this moment.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Because I've been talking to some experts. Shout out to Ben Castell. She isn't around so much on the forums and the Discord, but we love her all the same. But
The
basically,
forum
there's
member,
a
not the character.
yes, the forum member, not the character. But I haven't literally been talking to Voyager Witches. I wish that would be very interesting and terrifying. But basically, I had a chat with her about the sun and the moon, and what those represent. I first kind of tweaked on it on my reread when I was looking at Zephyr and Firth, when I was like, those color schemes, they look kind of like the sun and the moon a little bit. And we're told that the ring, the Territory Lord's ring, has the metals of silver and gold, which in alchemy kind of, I believe, represent the sun and the moon. And the basic idea is that in Buddhist belief, when you take the sun and the moon and you put together, you get enlightenment. And you get this because they're used generally to represent two things that are of the same nature, but contrast each other. So, for example, the sun and the moon are both celestial bodies. They both shine light, but, the sun is fiery and passionate, somewhat like Jessica or Shannon, also a feminine celestial body, whereas the moon is cool, calm, and collected, arguably like George and Cannon. I think there are a lot more pairs that you could kind of stretch this to fit, but those are the most obvious ones as the lovers of this tale. And it just occurred to me that when we get that moment when Shannon and Cannon come together and they the sun displays aspects of the moon and the moon displays aspects of the sun, they reach what in Buddhism is enlightenment. And this is also reflective of the alchemical concept of perfection. And that's why we then have them come together, and then Beatrice is formed out of that. She's the golden soul, the enlightened one that then goes to save Battler. And yeah, I just think this scene is so fascinating to look at, and how it kind of highlights the fact that Cannon and Shannon come together, because all the way up until this point, there are moments you could argue that they, display, coolness or fieriness opposed to their nature. But in general, Cannon and Shannon are kind of almost two-dimensional in that sense, that Cannon is always the calm, cool one who doesn't like love, and Shannon is always pointing out to George. out of all the characters as furniture, they are the most kind of two-dimensional in that sense. And then them, gaining that third dimension is what makes them human. And this might be a good time to talk about furniture, I guess, and how this is relevant to the story. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, you newbie guys, but Canon just wants shoes, very true. But Canon and Shannon are used to kind of represent the culprit or are the culprit in some way. And obviously the only way that these furniture characters reach enlightenment is by becoming one, in a sense, which in the theory that we're all accepting, that's exactly what's going on. They are one to begin with, and then they split up into these Canon and Shannon and Beatrice and Zephyr and further personalities.
Actually, one thing I want to bring up is I once heard a thing about how yin and yang are almost supposed to represent truth and ideals. And to go back to this one scene in episode 2 where they're both looking at the sea, and then Ken is like, the sea is gray, and then she's like, no, the sea is blue. Without love, you can't see it, and stuff. It's kind of like that truth versus ideals thing where Shannon is kind of the ideals and what she wants to be and what her goals and aspirations and everything, and Canon is kind of the negative of recognizing what they are. At least that's what I thought about it.
I don't think I have anything in particular to add to the whole thing about, Sun and Moon. There are a list of other characters you said you could apply them to.
There's so many.
And those are certainly interesting. I think the main one that I would point out that you didn't bring up was Burn and Lambda.
Oh, yeah, no, that one's really good, because we even, same sort of thing going on there with, how Burn and Lambda very much exemplify the Moon and the Sun then.
And again with the color schemes.
Yeah, they're almost like that parity taken to the extreme.
Yes, absolutely. Burn is very, very rarely shows emotion that we would consider real, and Lambda is always jumping around being as excited as possible.
I think the other thing that I like about this is the actual tie to alchemy, because it's something we've been discussing a fair bit, is that alchemy actually ties a lot into the story, because, Goldsmith.
Yes.
And the other thing that we brought up is fight math.
Yes.
I don't know what everyone else calls it, but the fight math in this game is very clearly trying to tie together the concept that magic is a product of probability. And that's kind of an alchemical concept, and I really think that it's neat that there are other details that pair alchemy and its understanding of the world to this story, because, it's very clearly a big factor in how magic is portrayed.
Because alchemy fundamentally is a product of physical, spiritual, and philosophical aspects. And it's the idea that if you bring these three aspects of a being, if you bring all that together, you can create something. So it's a classic example of turning lead to gold. One might even say that because Battler, he loses the Oshumian name, he leaves for 6 years, and then he comes back, and then by the end of EP5, he becomes what's called a golden soul, which is it's the exemplary of the idea of perfecting something that was ordinary. In the same way that Kinzo kind of was, the golden head, he was the guy who brought back the family, and now he's nothing, he's dead, he's dust, right?
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Absolutely. All things can be equated to cause and effect. And in alchemy, we believe that it's not just about the physical things, it's also about the spiritual things. It's about rituals. It's about, magic, and the way that we understand magic is there is a physical vessel, but there's also emotional stuff, and in the course of the narrative, there's narrative stuff going on there that means that we could even equate it to the design of the novels with if we put these two characters together, what does that produce? If we put Ava and Natsui in a room, we're going to have sparks fly, we're going to have fighting, we're going to have them splitting up, and then two of them are going to die in a closed room. It just is a very interesting concept to me, and I'm not fully on top of this myself, but the way that Ryukashi talks about this fundamental way of understanding the world and of affecting things via probability and equations and taking two things and adding them together to produce a better thing, I just find it very fascinating.
I think the other thing that I find interesting about the pairing is the whole idea of how, Beatrice and Battler as characters in Purgatory and the metaspace couldn't ever really come to a conclusion and be each other's opposite because, you know, at the beginning they were both the wild, emotional sun, and then they both became, you know, the moon, trying to think too hard about it and not considering who the other was as a person. And then eventually, you know, they each adopted, you know, the aspects that allowed them to actually work together, coming to the conclusion of episode 6.
Yeah. I would argue that they both become the Golden Souls by the end, but certainly, like, you know, you've also got, like, Chick Beatrice as the sun and Elder Beatrice as the moon, but I don't know. It's one of those things you can kind of argue around as to whether, you know, Battler and Beatrice are supposed to be the moon and the sun by the end to, like, you know, represent that enlightenment, but I think that the point is that they're supposed to both be, you know, the gold. They've transformed from mere humans into Game Master and Golden Witch, right? Like, this entire journey, their entire character arc was from nothing to the entire world, right?
This is a super interesting concept. Thanks for bringing this up.
You've got a wild train. I don't really have much to add to that.
No, that's fine. Like, we were even talking about this beforehand, that, like, I don't know how much this, like, this analogy or this aspect of the story is actually going to help you to, like, derive a whole bunch of meaning from for the characters, but from a design perspective, because that's the kind of thing that I focus on when I read visual novels and when I approach stories. I find it very interesting the way that that Ryukishi has set all this up, because he does nothing indeliberately. Everything, even himself repeating himself constantly. Not that I've ever heard Ryukishi repeat himself, but you know, everything he does is deliberate, even if it's not always well conceived. As we kind of talked about.
I mean, I'm always
Featherine.
cautious about interpretations like this, because
Absolutely.
when it comes to dualism, you can apply it to almost anything, and you can kind of like, it can end up becoming a sort of like Illuminati's type thing where like you match up all the numbers and it ends up making the triangle or something.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's why I brought up the whole thing with alchemy, because I think it's still relevant to the story, even if it wasn't necessarily an intention.
But we need to make sure we're not like overextending our
No. And of course, I would say, if I may, I would say to those of you listening at home, do some research, look into it, think about it for yourself. Let me know if what I'm saying is insane, because I am totally okay with you know this podcast coming out and somebody like, actually that's a load of bull. Let me tell you about alchemy, because I'm an alchemy expert. I am totally okay with that.
I am an alchemist.
Fair enough. Yeah.
One of my favorite parts about story design is looking at what was intentional, what are connections that you're drawing without reason, and what were connections that the author made accidentally. That, you know, because, you know, you write about what you know, you write about what inspires you. So if you do understand these concepts, even if you don't realize that you're writing them, you know, maybe they were part of what was making your brain tick in that way. And I think it's really interesting to consider that even if it wasn't part of the intention, the fact that that connection is there does, you know, raise a valid question about how these concepts came about in the first place and why they actually ended up being a valid application to the story.
Like when you go down to like dualism and like you can apply to Taoism or Buddhism or alchemy, like these are concepts of like yin and yang, like are very prevalent in Eastern thinking. So like even if it wasn't intentional, it's very easy for this kind of stuff, things coming to pairs, like contrasting pairs, to appear in a lot of like Eastern media. I think you'll find a lot, even some Western, because like alchemy is not Eastern by any stretch.
I mean, a lot of like arts and literature studies do focus on that, about how the context of the author might have influenced them in ways that maybe they didn't even intend. So, you know, you don't want to ever sit there and be like, but how does this let me solve the story? You want to sit there and be like, you know, how does this interpretation add or subtract to my value of the story? And do I think it's relevant to me?
It's fun.
This week on the Literature Podcast.
Yeah, it's a bit different from what we usually do for these podcasts.
Look, this is what happens when you bring us on. Jokrono and me, this is our jam.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that, you know, the mystery, as you said way back at the start of the podcast, is kind of like, it's shown to us, this is how step A happened, this is how step B happened. We don't have to think about, like, you know, well, I mean, we do, but we don't have, like, the main challenge being, how was the game board resolved?
No, I mean, for sure.
So it's a really interesting moment to talk about different aspects of the story like this.
It's really good. I enjoyed your discussion of this, Magus. It's not something that I would
My rant?
connected.
I hope you enjoy. Look, I'm fully aware. I only ever rant. That's what I do.
Leave it to Ryukishi to tie in Taoism and Christianity and whatever
Yeah.
Catholicism.
A lot of that stuff. Religion is super fun to like correlate with stories. Anyway.
So Flare, you said you had something else you wanted to bring up about the love trials?
Okay. So, when you're looking at what's actually happening in the love trial, it's literally a competition between one of the three, like, of-age cousins, if you will. I'm not going to count Maria. She's 9. And if you're going with the theory, if you subscribe to the theory that we all subscribe to, then it's Shannon and Cannon and Beatrice, each paired up with one of the cousins. So it's literally a love trial of Sayo's persona picking a cousin to dedicate to.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the aspects that hints most strongly in this episode about the culprit theory we're subscribing to, in terms of like foreshadowing where the ending goes. It's certainly very interesting, and Magus brought up earlier, you know, I have a whole bunch of jokes about things about how like they all raised their hands at the same time to see who would go next. But there are a whole bunch of really interesting details there, and then it's also fun, as you were saying in our notes, Flair, to talk about how all of the love trials involve these twilights and all of the trials of love that all of the other characters went through in the story.
It's literally Ryukishi, like, shoving it in your face that, like, hey, you need to examine love and the relationships that, like, these are built on.
And it's really fun to look at, you know, how all of these characters can have motives established from what we see in those monologues and dialogues talking about their past of love. You know, most of them have all had their own feature episode to an extent as well. And it's fun to talk about, you know, as accomplices in our culprit theory, how that would be part of the reason maybe why they did these things. And how part of the reason that, you know, maybe the family's so twisted and at each other's throats all the time is because they've all had these hard journeys to get there.
As a sort of a personal, I mean, this has zero to do with any of that. I just really like George and Ava's fight. Like,
Oh god,
Me
really?
too.
That was horrifying.
I loved it.
I mean, it was horrifying, but it was
Creepy.
also a very visceral way to look at Ava's
True.
motivations
Yeah.
as a
Just
character.
stuff her son back into her bloody womb.
yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, it's like. I just thought it was interesting that, you know, of a lot of the relationships that have been explored through Umineko so far, George and Ava's hasn't been really, you know. I mean, we knew it was pretty one-dimensional. It was a pretty simple relationship.
I know Pliskin can't stop talking about how he abused George in episode 1.
Yeah, I mean,
Neither can I.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's become a theme.
I mean, yeah, throughout the whole story, George has sort of been like an enormous pushover, and Ava's just kind of told him what to do, and he's done it. And you know, I mean, George is a wimp, and Ava is an overbearing mother who, while she might sort of have, you know, have George's quote-unquote best interest in mind, the relationship has not been healthy at all. And I just really liked, I liked how Ryukishi has sort of simultaneously brought up all of that to the surface and then resolved it nicely with that fight. I just thought it was really good writing, and I enjoyed it enormously.
They felt kind of like a bit of a conclusion to each of those characters' particular emotional journeys. We finally got to
so.
hear like the full story of Ava's raising of George. We finally got to hear the full story of how Kyrie and Rudolph got married. We finally got to hear the full story of what the hell happened to Rose's husband.
Yeah, I liked Rose's as well. That was my second
I was just
favorite.
happy that we got to hear World End Dominator again.
And I particularly like the fact that, you know, despite all of the things that have happened to Maria through this story, she still comes to her mother's defense, because Maria still understands that as awful as her mother is, you know, it's because her mother needs support. She needs love.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
All the characters need love.
What's the deal with diplomatic immunity?
Oh, that was okay. Like, I know you're asking this in sort of a mystery sense, but that was a bullshit OP move. Sakataro was just like, also we're immune to damage, and you can't hurt us. I was
but then
oh,
Shannon's
okay.
way of getting around that was even more bullshit. It's like, oh, I'm not hurting you. I'm just using
Stop
a
hitting
shield.
yourself. Stop hitting
Yeah.
yourself.
When's the last
Stop
time
today.
any of the magic hasn't been bullshit, though?
I mean, yeah. It was just one bullshit thing after another, and I had to laugh when Sakataro was just like, yeah, we're immune to everything because reasons.
It's like a kid's game. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm immune to rock.
It's like-
I also thought that was fun
Yeah.
looking back on previous episodes where Maria has always been the one to survive, barring a couple of exceptions. You know, the author creator of the game board or whatever perhaps does kind of give Maria this power to an extent, where she's one of the ones chosen to survive because she's been granted this right for some reason.
Kids can't die in movies, right?
Can we take a pause for a second? Because this whole time I've been playing with a stress ball, and it just exploded. So, what do I do? My hands are all
Is
sticky. I
recording a
can't do
podcast
anything.
that much of a challenge?
Apparently
Sorry.
Oh
so.
my gosh, what is
So
in
stressed.
this?
Oh my god.
Stressful
Well,
explode.
just very
Because I squeezed it
ramping
too
out of
hard.
control. Oh my god.
Not how.
Oh, it's
that's,
all
that's
over
a
my
bad
hands.
stress
Oh
ball.
no.
Holy shit! That's just making you more stressed.
Let's take 10 and let Flare clean up.
Okay, hang on.
Are we just about to... Nah, whatever.
The main question that I'm struggling with is, we originally have Battler marrying Erika, and then we move on to Battler marrying Beatrice.
That was so rapey, that scine where Erika was putting the ring on his finger.
That
Yeah,
scene made me
boys.
Yeah.
terribly uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I never want to read that scene again.
it was definitely like that was the most euphemistic and like it was just riddled with all kinds of stuff that was
I thought it was terribly fitting that of all the characters to be subjected to that, it's Battler, who was the one that's always been speaking in saucy language the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, we all know Battler is a hard M, so
Thank you, episode 2.
yeah.
Anyway, I think that for right now, I don't have quite an answer as to why this wedding thing is so fitting, I guess, and why Ryukishi is building up this imagery so much. I feel like episode 7 and probably 8, more than 7, will probably delve a little bit more into that particular imagery. Because I mean, if we're being honest, it's not been a terribly significant image. Right? I mean, I'm not alone in that. Am I, Jokrono? Like, weddings haven't been a large feature.
I mean, are you trying to bait me into saying what I think?
I would like to hear what you think. Not the whole, like, give us a TLDR on that.
I think
But,
I think that Hachijo wrote the wedding into the story to be significant as to why she is the one writing. I think that talking about how Erika is an insert and Vigilia is an insert, and how there's that back and forth between, you know, Vigilia dropping hints at the end of episode 5 and all of these different kind of indirect conflicts that Vigilia and Erika have are really interesting in terms of if you perceive them as being aspects of one character. But the main thing I think is that the wedding is there to signify the end of, you know, the shattered love story portion of episode 6. But I think basically that Hachijo wrote it in because she, through Erika, wants that love of Battler, but kind of comes to realize that she can't have it when Beatrice is there. again, if you want to go into that, check the post on the forums, because I'm not going to sit here and ramble for it for another 40 minutes, because I already did that yesterday.
I guess my interpretation was that Ryukishi wrote it in as like a big final set piece location to have all the characters in one room for Battler and Beatrice's big revelation and big fight against Erika. But I think that Hachijo wrote it in to kind of signify, the end. Weddings are kind of a sign of showing like commitment, that Battler and Beatrice are kind of settling down, they're wrapping up the story, they're getting the job done. I think it's kind of just there to kind of signify the end of that kind of arc, as you said, of like this shattered love story of picking one thing.
I just want to do shout outs to that amazing scene where like Beatrice saves Battler. There's that little thing there where they really like hammer it in that this Beatrice might not be exactly the same as the original Beatrice, because like she's still got like the chick personality in there. Like she still acts demure at moments, but like she can also act as the haughty Beato we're all familiar with.
I love that scene where she like first walks into the chapel and like her facial expressions like change really rapidly, and you can see the old Beatrice just starting to come back. It's great.
Yeah.
But then we have the question of is the original Beatrice that we used to know, does she not have that demure side?
Correct. Yeah, that's what I was trying
An excellent question. Yeah,
trying to get on.
Good stuff.
It's like if you go back and look at Beatrice through the past episodes, like very much like the haughty image is what we see the most of. But then you get episode 3, and like we see kind of glimpses of this less confident Beatrice that is very much trying to get Battler to acknowledge her. It really ties into the whole arc we've had in episode 6, actually. Maybe Beatrice is actually just she's more of a really good actress than anything else.
Maybe. Shout out to the ending of episode 3.
Yeah.
Right, Seraphitic?
Beautiful.
Well, that facial expression changing rapidly over a very short span of time. Oh,
yeah.
So beautiful.
So how much of everything was an act? And what was acting and what
Who
wasn't?
knows?
Well, I mean, you do because you've read the thing, so,
Maybe he doesn't, though.
Shush you. Maybe I don't know.
And to stick my flag into the ground and give my expectations at last.
Go, Jokrono.
I don't think they know, Seraphitic. I don't think they do. I think that they're the actors in this podcast. I think they're pretending we're going to get these kind of answers.
I know. Who knows? Who knows how much answers we're going to get?
I think that the claim of being an Umineko veteran is the greatest ruse of all. Because I don't think we'll ever get the answers that they pretend we'll get.
It was all a cunning
wouldn't put it
ruse.
past veterans.
I mean, to an extent, I've said my expectations have already been a tad shattered.
Hold on, did I ever promise you answers?
Yes.
When did I ever promise you answers?
Right at the start.
No. This is... damn you. I never promised any answers. I promise no confirming or denying of anything.
Yeah.
So,
But I still don't think we're going to get concrete answers on terribly much. I don't feel like that's terribly in the spirit of how the story's been told. I almost feel like, in the same way that Battler's like, I don't want to give away Beatrice's heart, I think that it's going to be the same as we go forward, where we're never going to get the exact truth because exacting it would take away from the puzzle itself.
And you might be right for certain for certain aspects of the truth. I think you might be right. But I think the purpose of episode 7 certainly is to give us some answers. Maybe not everything, but I mean, it definitely sounds like the intention is to at least, I mean, similarly to how episode 6 didn't exactly come straight out and give us the answer, it did give us like, hey, if you're thinking along these lines, here's like pretty much 100% confirmation on what you're thinking. And if I'm correct, and you're correct, Jokrono, in sort of our theories on how, of the truth of Rakanjima, then I think episode 7 maybe won't come straight out and say things. It'll probably hint around things, make things a little bit more obvious, and at least give us enough to say, yeah, we were right, or we missed something.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
I don't think I can put into words how excited it makes me that there are still 2 episodes left after how much was revealed in episode 6.
Seriously, right? Like, 2. Like, I would think 1 would be enough to wrap things up, but...
How many times have we... I mean, because Aspie, back in episode 4, you were saying, like, the story's basically over, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And, like, in Umineko, like, the story is basically over, like, 10 times.
Yeah, it
Maybe
feels
not
like
many,
that. It felt like that at the end of episode 5 in some ways. Like, the story's over. And now at the end of episode 6, well, the story's over. And, like... At the end of episode 7, if what I think is gonna happen, like, where we get a whole bunch of answers, I expect it's probably gonna feel again like, well, the story's over.
But Ryukishi just can't fucking put his pen down.
Nope. If Higurashi has proven anything, then no, he can't.
Especially with our, like, new announcement of getting, like, an episode 9 of Umineko is true, or, like, a little bonus thing. He literally cannot leave well enough alone.
I've been thinking about this, and I reckon, like, if Ryukishi was more concise, he could have got it down to 5 episodes pretty easily.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
I
the
wouldn't
fluff's
put it
half the
past
fun.
Ryukishi.
That's my thoughts. I love the fluff. It's so much fun.
But
So,
I still
Aspie, I have a
appreciate-
question.
Yeah, sure.
If I give you your game board back, can I look at the answers and rip out the guts of the story?
Well, we'll have to see about that, won't we?
Aspie, I think I'm going to promote you to Game Master. I want to look at the answers.
This is such an honor for you giving me my game board back.
Oh, thank you, Jokrono. Oh, wise and merciful. Thank you.
It's me taking it back, boy. This is my podcast. We don't need you anymore.
Oh
Well,
no!
I guess I kinda-
What have I
I kind
done?
of do.
I'm going to be tossed aside like the useless piece that Erika was.
Rude.
I can't
We all know
say
your
that.
Angie. All right. We all know your Angie.
If anyone's on the next podcast, you are. So
Oh! I feel honored.
I shouldn't be playing favorites, but
We all know.
I know what the
We all
audience
know.
wants.
Jokrono is your piece. We all know this.
I'm the best Miko.
So that's how he's
Yeah.
been getting answers.
I actually have a small announcement to
monster.
make. But we have Chrono Trig here in chat here, and he has actually offered to join us for one of the podcasts. It'll probably be episode 8, but yeah, so that'll be very exciting to get an actual translator of the game on board to chat with us.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Looking forward to
Do
it, Chrono
it.
Trig.
Oh my gosh,
Look, I
yes,
need Jokrono
please.
and Chrono Trigger on the same podcast, just so we can see them confuse their names all the time. That's all I need.
Sounds
Chrono Trig.
Chrono.
Jokrono and Chrono, because that's how I imagine we want to refer to him. So I just want to hear the confusion. I'll be real talking. Entertain me, child of man.
It's going to be very hard to pick the cast for the next few episodes, though. It's going to get interesting. Like I said, like we're pretty much over the hump now, where the veterans and the newcomers are pretty much on the same page, barring a few little things. That's why we can say confidently that we agree with your interpretation. I can say that this is largely the accepted answer. So congratulations, guys. But there is still like that's still like the surface level, right? Because like it really depends how deep you want to go with Umineko. We haven't even thought about the why done it very much yet. We've kind of gone over it on a little bit of a surface level, but
We
that's
understand
still,
what the why done it is, but not the significance thereof, I think, is where we are.
Yeah, I think so. I can't help but feel like we missed something, Jokrono. Like I just in my gut.
Yeah, it
it's just
doesn't.
saying,
What we have at the moment doesn't feel like quite enough for the murder of 18 people.
No.
So we're
right.
not
And
quite
that's
there.
kind of like that's where the question marks start rising, and that's why we still have 2 episodes to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though it feels like we're near the end, it's still 2 full episodes. Like it's like 40 hours of more than 40 hours of
Yeah,
content.
we're only 3/4 of the way done.
Time to reread everything all over again, see if we can find whatever.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Congratulations.
We only have to do it and then read episode 7 and then make all
You
of the
dying?
posts.
I think he's dying.
Seraphitic, you okay?
That's right, Seraph. If you need to reread, I can give you videos to edit. Save me some time.
It's a good plan.
Yeah, I'll just go back and rewatch all of your stuff.
Alright.
It's okay, guys. Don't think about it too hard. You'll give yourself a headache.
But Featherine, though, she told me to.
So, any last thoughts before we move on to episode 7?
I'd just like to give a small round of applause to Aspie for getting his game board back. Well done.
Shout out to Aspirety.
Shout out to Aspirety.
Shout out.
That Aspirety, though.
I did it all on my own.
Life is a amazing piece of music. I want to close and end my thoughts with that because
It deserves bookending.
I'd like to shout out 2 things. 1, that stress ball that exploded on me. That was fun. And 2, I would also like to shout out Ryukishi07 for writing this amazing story that we all get to take like 2.5 hours to analyze.
Oh boy, I wish it was just 2
and
hours.
yeah.
It's not enough time.
Shout out to Ryukishi.
What a giant nerd he is.
Giant nerd.
He's a big nerd.
Love him.
Let's put the fan art on screen. I know we had a little bit. Shout out to Rockmore. Shout out to Hoenn Hippo, Monteberis, and Amenini for submitting some fan art for this one.
Yeah.
So their works will be flashing up on screen.
I know for a fact that there is some not safe for work fan art on Rekenshima now, and I am so proud.
Oh god, I will never visit this thread again now that you've said that.
I have to go and find it.
Also, massive shout out to
Seven.
Mimsy,
Shout
Vice
out.
Golbez, and all of the other folks that participated in the thread this time. I know I jumped in super late to the thread because it took us a long while to record. And Zasante, how did I forget Zasante? My goodness. Those guys also made some amazing contributions to the thread. I'm probably forgetting someone else. Hippo, that's who else I'm forgetting. Awesome contributions to the thread. It was great fun reading through them all once I was finished and seeing, you know, what details people hadn't picked up. And adding and subtracting them to my own theories. It was a heap of fun, and it's always good to have that discussion. And I guess we're looking forward to episode 7. It should be a great ride. I'm scared.
You know what,
So excited.
I'm very scared.
so
Shout out to
excited.
I'm
Jokrono
excited.
and Seraphitic.
It is, I will say, like I say this every episode, but this next episode is fucking weird. It's different. from
We'll just
anything
have to
else in-
find
It's
out.
one
at
of
this
my
point.
favorite episodes. It's the Black Sheep.
I love it.
Alright, well, we will get there when we get
We
there.
will.
Aspire, this is your game board. Do you want to take us home?
We'll see you in the next game board, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Woo!
Could